Okay. All right. I call this meeting to order on Thursday.
Are we live?
February 15th, thank you. February 15th, 2024 at 7:04 p.m. A roll call. Is member Debbie Yassif?
Yes, here.
Present? Great. Is member Leahy present? Eileen Leahy?
Present.
Great. And Chair Smith-Brown is also present. We're now going to go to comments.
Could I make
yes, please.
I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda to include brief discussion of the task force on elections. At our last meeting, we discussed 11 of the recommendations, and there's 2 that we didn't get to. So I'd like to have the opportunity to review them.
Okay. Would you like that before focus priorities or?
It could be at the end,
Okay, so after general discussion.
after focus priorities, yeah.
Okay. So that's task force recommendation. All right, is there a second for that motion?
Second,
Okay,
sure.
I'm all in favor of that.
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Okay, so then let's move on to comments submitted. We do not have any comments submitted, but we do have someone who is present with us today.
You did have a comment submitted at the last.
We are going to talk, okay, so.
We're not talking about it, you're just putting it
Okay,
into the
so we
record
just
that
want to
he
make it,
submitted
put on record that John Michael Gudger, he did submit a comment at our last meeting, which was on January 18th.
Right, and put in does he have his address there?
Yes, his address is 19 Wardour Drive, Annapolis, Maryland, 21401. Right, thank you all for that. All right, please, Andrew Miller. Yes, we have a member from the task force that we had. It is now concluded, and so he's here with us to share. Would you like to please come on over and?
Yeah, that's fine. Just
Yep,
turn
that's
it
fine.
on.
Thank you, Andrew.
How's that?
Is that better?
All right, thanks everyone. So I am Andrew Miller, 110 East Street, and as the chair mentioned, I am a former task force member. So first of all, thank you all for your service on this committee. I just came here because I want to emphasize that I recognize that probably some of these task force recommendations went beyond what you all had originally envisioned for the task force, but I do believe that it's worth considering them all deeply, considering them all thoroughly, considering them all equally. And why I say that is because the problems identified by the task force can't really be addressed by, say, implementing one or two of the recommendations. To fully address them, I think really the large majority or all the recommendations need to be implemented. So I'll just take one example, is the lack of competition, right? So we know there's a problem where there's just not enough candidates running in these elections in Annapolis. And there's a couple of recommendations or numerous recommendations that could help address that, right? So one of them is public financing. A big barrier to entering into politics, entering into races, is a lack of financing, right? If somebody doesn't have a deep-pocketed donor behind them, if somebody isn't independently wealthy, it becomes much harder to run in a race, but public financing would help mitigate that. And we have a model at the county level that was recently introduced that could be useful to at least consider here at the municipal level. A second recommendation is independent redistricting, right? So right now we have a redistricting task force in Annapolis, but it is not fully independent. And when you have a situation where city council members can effectively draw their own districts, that can be another deterrent to candidates entering in the race, because those districts can be drawn in such a way that it advantages the incumbent. So we see this at the national level, and we see this at other county level and the municipal levels in other parts of Maryland and across the country, really. Now, interestingly, in Baltimore City, a council member just last week actually submitted a bill to the council for consideration to implement a independent redistricting commission similar to what we have in our task force report, where you use sortition and random selection and that sort of thing to make that fully independent and remove it from the political process, which I think would be very useful for, again, addressing that issue of improving competition. And then a third and final point that I'll make on improving competition is this idea of having a pick-two primary. Now, a pick-two primary occurs when those in the primary, so you'd have a blanket primary like is recommended in the report, so everybody votes on the same ballot, but voters can pick two candidates to move forward to the general election. I know there's other elections at the municipal level, I think school board, those sort of things where you pick multiple candidates. That has a lot of the benefits that ranked choice voting has, but it's much simpler. And it doesn't cost nearly as much to implement compared to ranked choice voting. This is sometimes called, it's like a form of what's called approval voting. And it's actually starting to get traction in Maryland. The legislature, just this legislative session, a bill was introduced that would allow counties to implement approval voting. So I think that's another way that, one, we can address the problem of the lack of competition and also take a leadership role here in some of our electoral governance. And then the final point that I'll make is just that I think there's discussion of potentially like dismantling the Board of Supervisors of Elections if we go with the state and county. I would personally caution against that. You all are obviously the experts, but I think of course, the mission of the board might change a little bit, right, if we go with the county, but I still do think there are useful things that the board could be doing. I would presume that there's going to be some, even if we adopt the state/county administration, there's still going to be some issues that are specific to the city, and I think it's still useful to have citizens involved in that and have a say in that, right, rather than just giving it to, I don't know, the Office of Law or whoever else would handle it without the board. So really, looking at this, I think there's like two paths we could take. We could kind of catch up Annapolis to some other municipalities by going with the state, by aligning our election timing with the presidential or gubernatorial elections, and that would put us in line with some other municipalities here. Or we could try to make Annapolis a model for electoral governance and try to get ahead on some of these things. So I hope we choose the latter, and I hope you all push for the implementation of the latter. I think we have a real opportunity here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. That's sounds nice, actually. Yeah, we appreciate you coming here tonight. So we're going to move forward to the approval of the minutes. There are three minutes from three of our past meetings that we've taken a look at. So if everyone's okay, we can maybe make a motion to approve all of these unless there are any major changes to any.
Make a motion. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the November 30th, 2023, December 21st, 2023, and January 15th, 2024 meeting minutes.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. I know there were minor edits, but we'll move forward.
Well, if you
Go
need to
ahead.
make them,
Yeah,
then,
go
well, we'll
ahead.
just pass the motion now.
Yeah, but it's fine. I think like a letter here or there. I think.
Well,
But I think
is it typos or is it
yeah, it's just
something?
minor type. But I think it'll be.
Do we need to redo that?
For now that we've passed the motion, there were like a couple typos or for the minutes, but that's something we can do. Yeah, we can say yes, but we're approving it fully, generally.
All right, well, I make a
know.
motion that we approve the minutes with, as written, but with typos corrected.
Yes, thank you for that. Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Awesome. I'll circle those. All in favor?
Aye.
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 I didn't notice that.
Okay. So we're now going to move on to the focus priorities leading up to the 2025 elections. I did have a question. I know we had a guest today. Is she still coming?
Well, unfortunately, the legislation's still in draft form, so this,
Right.
I had, so it's been drafted, it's now being reviewed in the Office of Law, and it's basically replacing City Code Chapter 4.28, taking out absentee voting and inserting mail-in ballot voting. And so it's consistent, the draft is consistent with what the state does, and it's basically, the process is that all registered voters in Annapolis will receive an application for the option of receiving a mail-in ballot for the primary and for the general. So if they send it back saying they want a mail-in ballot, they get a mail-in ballot. There will still be in-person voting, but there's no more, the state doesn't even use the term absentee ballot anymore, so it's basically just changing those. There are some things in looking at that code that may get moved to another place, because the way our code is written right now, it includes things like some canvassing, which really should be in a separate section. So again, that's being looked at, and hopefully we can have that more finalized at our next meeting. Just some other pertinent things that are in there is some changes. For instance, absentee, in the past, when people requested absentee voting, the voter covered the mail, the postage.
Right.
And so for these applications, it will be prepaid. That's also an effort to capture addresses, so that it will also have something on there similar to what was sent out recently by the county, saying if the person is no longer at this address, please return to sender. Looking at that, I don't think the deadline's changed. People will be able to apply both for the primary and the
General.
and the
General,
general. The biggest difference with the state is that we don't have access to the technology that the state uses. So for instance, our voters will not be able to download a ballot. They won't be able to go in and look and see if a ballot has been, if their ballot has been received yet. Now, that might be something we can work with the county on, but it doesn't go in code. So pretty much, it's pretty clear. It does include curing, which is where, when it arrives in the election office, the oath is looked at on the envelope, and if the oath hasn't been signed, the voter attempts to communicate with the voter are made. So that's the biggest thing with that. Anything on that, or do you want me to move to the second one?
No, I think, oh, Debbie, did you?
No, that's something else. I'm good.
Okay, yeah, the only thing, you already hit on it, it was emphasizing that we are going to send mailers to all residents.
Of eligible voters.
All eligible voters, all those that are registered voters.
Yes.
Okay, you
Not
know me, I'm always
Voters.
trying to get all registered voters, okay. We will be sending that, is,
Yeah.
oh yeah, that
Our
is,
microphones are on.
so we got to get it.
Okay. Okay, so number 2 is clarify City Code Chapter 4.40, ballot question procedures. I'm waiting to hear from Ashley on that. We're struggling with the lack of anything really pointing to municipal procedures. So let me see, she answered me, because some of the challenges is that there's lots of different ways to do ballot questions, and in the state of Maryland, there's 4 different types. But again, it addresses state and also county, not what we've been necessarily talking about. So when I sent the information to Ashley, she responded, because state laws govern what goes on a state ballot, not the ballots for just a municipality, most of the items that can go on a state ballot that would only affect that municipality relate to its incorporation or dissolution. So she's saying we could make a recommendation for what we want to do, and then she can legally provide guidance based on comparing it to state practices. So I think what I'm hearing her say is that we need to put forth what we're thinking of doing or what we'd like to do, and then have her look at it from the state. But I don't think we've really arrived at that either. When I look at what the process for the city is, it's very similar to the process at the state level. But the big piece, there's 2 pieces that have been missing, or that we've been talking about. One is coming up with a percentage of voters that need to sign it. The last I looked, for a citizen-run ballot question, it's what they call a citizen veto. I think it's called a citizen veto. It's 3% of the voters who voted for the governorship, not the governor, but the governorship in the previous election. So it could be, we could say, we want to say, in order for a question to go on the ballot, it needs to have X percentage. So we could do that. And then the other piece that we've talked about is how can a legislator, or how can the government put a ballot on a question? And so that's done at the county level, but again, it doesn't apply to the municipalities. So when we asked a similar question to David Garris when he was here last, he referred to Senate Bill 4108.3 was used by Hagerstown. I think that was back in like 2011, and that's when they put a question on their ballot at the city level to talk about moving to having the state run the election. So I haven't given that to Ashley yet to see if that's something that we could potentially use. Here, let me see. So the type of ballot measures, and this is all in the materials I've sent to you all previously.
Okay.
It's the veto referendum is mostly what's citizen-driven, and that is, Maryland does allow for that. It's 3% of the votes cast for governor at the last general election. So for non-emergency bills, 1/3 of the required signatures are due by June 1. So there's deadlines with this too that would also need to be. So we're really not there yet, but we need to kind of start coming up with a percentage. And if we need to do deadlines, if we want to do another jurisdiction that we've been looking at a lot too is Rockville, and that's where they do the advisory referenda. So it's not the same as a ballot question. So we could ask her to consider that. So I don't know what you all want to.
Didn't the last
something
meeting
back.
we
did.
talked about numbers? We looked at the numbers of voters and what we thought was attainable.
Reasonable, yeah.
What was it, a couple thousand?
It was a few thousand,
Yeah,
3,000.
3,000, I think. Is that what?
I believe that was
can
about
use that
8%
figure?
or so of the registered voters.
If we're kind of going in circles with waiting for information because maybe we can develop it ourselves, why don't we go ahead and give the law office our thoughts and see if that will nudge them towards drawing something up that's workable? And if our number is a certain percentage or a certain figure, if we have, 26,000 registered voters?
We have over 29.
So say, I think we're using
you said
30.
30,
Yeah,
yeah,
we
we
were
were saying
using 30,000 last month. And
we said
just take
10,000 of
10%.
that, 10% of that, and we said 3,000 about, so that's what we came up with.
Start with that, just to get something
moving.
moving.
I mean, 3,000 isn't, to me, that's because we talked about how that's about a ward. And then we talked about how it could be required that a certain amount could come from each ward, at least 100 or so.
Yeah, but see, we're getting complicated there, and when you start getting.
Yeah, I know, but that's what we
Right.
talked about.
I think we
but
need to
didn't.
just keep it
Straightforward.
But if you go by what the state's doing in terms of 3% of, if you did that for the mayoral and said 3% of the voters, it's a much lower threshold. So, I'll go by you, 3,000 or.
Well, how many, I would love to see
for
how
mayor
many,
and council, for what?
how many voted for mayor last time around.
Well, there
or
were about
registered, yeah.
9,000 voters, so you assume most of them voted. So you're talking then about 270.
Yeah, so maybe 20% vote in the city elections. That's what you're saying in the municipal. So if we have 30,000 and
Well, our
6,000
turnover at the
vote,
last election was 40%.
40%. So let's take
was a
50%.
mail-in.
So if we have 30,000 voters and 50% vote in the municipal, then that would be 1,000.
1,500. If we're talking about 15,000, 10%, 1,500.
Yes, 1,500.
Yeah. Which is a
Signatures.
reasonable, that
Which
is
is
about 1,000.
doable.
And personally, I think for a threshold, it shouldn't be too high, but
I
it also
agree.
shouldn't be too
I'm
low.
good with that.
I don't think
Yeah.
it should be too low. Maybe we could start there at 1,000 because we're in that range of 1,000 to 3,000
Yeah.
voters.
May we want people to be involved, both not only in running, but in maybe supporting a candidate. Maybe a petition drive would get people, inspired or aware.
And even though there's a threshold to even put the question on the ballot, then we have to think about what is the percentage to require it, either binding or non-binding. What is that percentage? So even if it is a little more accessible for someone to put it on the ballot, it may be a larger task to get it passed. So
Can I suggest that what we recommend or ask Ashley to do is to tell us how we can, what is the mechanism by which we can apply a percentage and the type of it. I mean, we have to know what we can do before we can actually make it. And I like to have things based on precedent.
I know.
So I think
The law office has been slow in responding direction to us, and every month is going by, and we're
fine.
getting tight with time. And so if we maybe come forth with
I thought.
a proposal, then that might get them fired up.
I think
Oh, no,
so.
you can't do it that way.
well, we're part of a bigger group, okay? And it's budget season, so that's the
Right.
reality
Yeah.
of
But
government.
But
so.
we also are coming up
Okay, so what
on an
proposal would you
election
like to
next
put
year.
forth?
10% of those, I would just say 10% of, we either have to say of registered voters or of those who voted in the last election.
The previous election.
We can't give a number.
Now, that will always change.
It will.
You know,
That's why
who
we
voted will
right,
always change. Exactly. We want
exactly.
consistency.
Exactly.
And saying, okay,
Just say
it has to be-
1,000.
Can we offer that? Let's
We can
just
offer anything,
let's just,
and then they'll respond.
we could also give more than one option. Hey, actually, what would it look like if we offered the one option of the 1,000, the 10%, or the 1,500, 10% of those who voted in the previous election, or what would it look like if we did the 10% of the registered voters? Would that be acceptable? I mean, we could offer two different proposals, I think.
Yeah, but I think we can offer a myriad of ideas, but whether it be for a candidate or for a question, it should be the same, I think,
Yeah.
just to avoid confusion.
What do you mean, request a candidate or a
Like
question?
how to get a question on the ballot if a group wants to try to push forth.
Well, we have a process that exists that's pretty consistent with what the state does.
And what was that, 2%?
No, it doesn't have a percent. That's
Oh.
the issue.
That's what
And-
we have to figure out.
Okay, we don't have a percent. So when people have said we'd like to do it, we have to give them a percentage. And then the other issue is, do we want to consider a mechanism for which government,
Yeah.
the governing body, can initiate?
Oh, we had talked about asking the governing body. Weren't we going to reach out to the mayor and council to see what they would want and what they have thought and why it hasn't been done already? I'm sure they would like to have ballot questions at different times for different reasons. Have they never
Well, I
wanted
stand
to do
firm.
it?
Well, I stand firm and no, the government should not have the ability to put ballot questions on. They are residents. They can get the signatures necessary, just like all of us can get the signatures necessary. Let's make it an even and equal playing field that's equitable. And so I think that's the one. I do like both. I like both of them, and I would like to see how they would receive both of those proposals, because maybe they say, you know what, I think it's more realistic for us to do just like the state does the previous election, or maybe it does make more sense to be more specific or general to the entire registered body, but that changes too. Who's registered to vote, that changes. And so
Sure.
both of them will be fluid, though at least we're giving them two different options for us to get some feedback on. Because those are the only ones we've discussed, really, and prioritized. How do you feel about that, Eileen?
I think we still have to come up with what we're going to ask Ashley to do.
Actually, how does it look, or what does it look like for us to do either model? I mean, we're going to present both models and say, can we get some feedback on this? What can you move forward and possibly?
All right, so
Yeah.
state it. So we
Okay.
put in a motion and then,
Okay. So the one model is the 10% of the registered voters in the city, the total registered voters, 10% of that, and or the other model, which was the 10% of those who voted in the previous mayoral election or city council election, city
well,
election.
you have to be specific. I mean, when you're talking about this, we can't be like,
So
gotta be
well, if we
specific.
say, because if you say mayor, that's just one race, but mayor
The
usually gets more of the
2021
votes.
2021 election, then.
The previous election.
Yeah.
So we can just say the previous
Right.
the previous election.
All right, 10%
City
of
election.
those currently registered, or we have to give a date because that changes on a daily basis.
As of
10% of those registered in the
As
last
of-
election. You have to put a date on it.
or January 1 of that year.
A date for the,
For the number, a date for the
When we'll do
number
that tally
of
of
registered
what- okay.
voters, because every day people are coming
Oh.
on and off.
is it too late to do it at the registration deadline? I feel like, is that too late to do it in the previous, like, for the registration deadline? Because let's say people are still registered to vote at the last moment, but then again, we do want to kind of base it off one previous,
Well, ballot, well, and it
Okay, I think
depends.
you guys have to understand the process. This takes a while, so you can't just put it right beforehand. I mean, if
Yeah, that's
somebody
what I was
wants to
getting
do
at.
so we have to be specific, okay? So we're not changing the process. You're saying 10% of registered voters as of when?
we could base it on the previous.
No, give a date. You can't, I mean,
Well,
as
I'm
of
just
when?
offering. I don't want to say one because I feel like there's many of options. I think that if we're going to do it, what the state does, they do it in the previous gubernatorial election. So we can say the previous election, the
Okay,
previous.
that's fine.
Yeah,
Well,
we can
that's
say the
4, it
previous.
could be 4 years.
Yeah, it can be, and that's a long
Or we
time.
could just say January 1st of that calendar year.
Okay, I think
Just
that's
to make
fine.
it much
Yeah, the new year,
closer.
boom. Okay, you should have registered 7/31st. Okay,
As of January 1. Okay,
Of the current
I'm
year.
glad we got there.
Whatever year
okay, of
we're
current year.
in. Because it could be February, it could be November.
okay. Of the current year that the ballot question is being brought forth, is that what we're saying? Okay,
Just of
Of
current
the
year.
beginning
just
of the
current
drive.
year.
okay.
So when they started, it's that current year. So what's your other option?
We said 10% of the mayor, and then we said 10% of the registered voters.
Of the previous municipal election.
10%.
Okay, so we're gonna do 4 years. That one will do the 4 years.
No, are you talking about the 10% of the voters who voted? Okay, that's not what you said. You want-
Yeah, I said
Is that what
registered
you want?
voters.
Registered voters is
It's
different
different.
than.
It is.
We already got the total registered
That was for the
voters.
mayoral election.
No,
Look at the city, because we talked about 10% of those who voted in the previous election, and then we said those that voted in the.
So the two, what I'm understanding is the two choices we'd like Ashley to look at is for a petition drive, whether for a question or for a candidate to get on the ballot. 10% of total city registered voters as of January 1st of whatever year we're in. Or the second choice would be 10% of the voters in the previous.
Voted, yeah.
Who voted in the previous city election.
Sure. I'm glad we got that ironed. That's it. That is it. That's what we
Exactly.
said.
and which election? Primary, general, special?
The general.
Now, if there is because specials too, we don't
Some
know.
people
So, yeah,
don't vote
general.
primary.
Right,
more-
but the
more
point
vote
is you have to
general.
be specific.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we're gonna be.
We'll give you what you want, Eileen. General.
I'm
all of
just
us-
telling you,
No, we're gonna be. No, I'm with that.
Trying to drag you guys across the.
Okay.
No, we're gonna get that.
Okay, 10% of voters who voted in the
Previous
previous
general, municipal general.
municipal general
General
election. Even though you realize that there's great disparity in those two.
Yep.
Yes, I was over here thinking about how the numbers. are
Right?
gonna be way
Yeah, but I mean, we're giving choices.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's. Is there any middle ground there that you think? Because what about what you think? What are you saying over here?
I'm trying not to say anything
Ooh.
because I think you have to pick one. You have to, there's a great disparity. 10% of the total registered voters could be, say, 3,000. 10% of voters who voted in the previous municipal elections could be 800 to 900.
Yeah.
So again, we're supposed to be asking Ashley to help us find out what we can do, not get into the.
No, but I thought we
Some
had,
nitty-gritties.
we have. For like
Not as a
months.
not as a recommendation for a
procedure.
an opinion. Right.
Okay.
So we're going to ask her, can we do this option with the 10% of those who are
Okay, if that's
registered?
what you want. I mean, okay. So
Or
that's
Now,
her
one
own-
is a more
Or
grassroots.
she can provide.
she's only going to give us an opinion. So we have this. What else did we want to ask her to consider?
Well, those are the only two as regards to this.
Well, I'd like for her to clarify the type of ballot question a municipality can ask. A municipality such as Annapolis can ask, because there's 4 different types in the state. One is citizen-driven, but I just want to clarify it because one is also legislative-driven. So clarify the type of ballot question a municipality such as Annapolis can ask on a ballot or can place on a ballot.
What's an example of that? Like if
Do you want nonpartisan elections? Or, I mean, that would be something
Tax
that could be,
increases.
well, right now the county can do it for charters. So
Redistricting.
most of it is if it's going to be something like most likely a charter or something like that. So if you're changing the type of elections, that's going to be a charter.
Okay.
If you're going to change sinking, that's going to be a charter. So
Redistricting.
So clarify the type of ballot question a municipality such as Annapolis can place on a ballot. And
Binding or
what
non-binding.
mechanism,
yeah, that's what I'm
well,
gonna
that
wanna
goes
put
to
there.
the type. Once you
Okay.
find out what the type is, you can, what mechanism might be used for allowing legislative initiated ballot questions at the municipal level.
So,
Yeah.
in a timeline. Right. I have a note here. I thought we had asked Cynthia to review for ballot questions a clearer process, including a timeline for submission. Identify number of signatures required. And a type of question, if the state has to be involved.
Well, that's,
That's going to go to the question.
Yeah,
that you
so I
said,
don't know if we have an
clarify the type
answer on any of
question.
those
she
yet or
doesn't,
not.
because she's waiting to hear from us too.
Oh, so we're waiting on each other.
Tonight we should be able to give her something.
Okay, and then another thing in regards to number 3, might the State Bill 4108.3 be applicable? Okay, so there's 3 different things that we can ask for an opinion from Ashley.
Okay. Do you mind just going straight through and saying all that we wrote, we've written? 'Cause
Well, I
have-
can put it in the motion if you want.
Sure, absolutely. Let's do it.
Perfect.
All right, I'll make a motion. First motion is to make a motion for the Office of Law to consider the percentage of signatures needed for a question to be put on the ballot in a municipal election. The first option being 10% of total registered voters as of January 1 of the current year, or 10% of voters who voted in the previous municipal general election.
I love it. Is there's
There's a third, right?
Well, we're doing
we're
one
going
at
to
a
do one
time.
at a time. Is there a second
Yep.
for that?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
I oppose.
Okay. Ooh, see, that's what I'm saying, Ali. Why did you gotta tell her what? So do you have another?
I oppose. That's what's on the
That's-
table. I
Okay.
oppose.
That's okay, because
fine.
it's going to generate discussion.
Sure, sure.
And the law
Okay,
office will
so the
tell us
second-
what they can or can't do.
So the second is to ask the Office of Law for an opinion clarifying the type of ballot question a municipality such as Annapolis can place on a municipal ballot.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye. All right, and then the third, I make a motion. What?
This is the one I love.
The third is to request an opinion from the Office of Law, asking what mechanism might be used for allowing legislative-initiated ballot questions at the municipal level. And a second part of that is, might Senate Bill 4108.3 be applicable?
Okay. Is there a second for that?
What was that? A Senate bill? A current Senate bill right now?
When I looked it
in
up,
the
it was
Senate?
still, but
Okay.
that's the one that David Garris cited that Hagerstown used, so it was a while ago. So I don't know
To
when it
sync
was.
with,
So it's not a bill right now before the
No.
session, before the before
No.
the MGA?
No.
Okay.
is there?
Okay, I don't know
May I
what
ask a
that bill
question?
did. but-
Yeah, I was
Well,
gonna.
that's what David Garris at our meeting said, that when Hagerstown went, they put a question on their ballot,
to sync.
and that's what they cited. I went back and I listened to it
Okay.
yesterday.
What was that again?
Senate Bill 4108.3. So I think that's what he was answering our question in regards to that.
4108.3, that's not a,
I've never heard of that.
that's
Maybe
not
I
a
get
Senate
it.
number. That's not how bills are numbered. Unless
said the
it's
same
county.
thing.
You think it's
Yeah.
county?
Yeah, I don't. They don't
I looked it
never
up.
heard of a point. Anything.
Or federal?
Federal doesn't.
I mean, Keanu and I both worked at
I've
the
never seen points,
legislature, and that's not.
That's why I was just going to
that's
let
not-
it be, but I've never heard of a point.
That's not the
All
way
right, I
that-
can strike that
Sure.
part if you want me to
Yeah,
strike it.
I'm just not sure where that number goes, because if it's state, that's not how state bills are numbered.
And I did have a question. Are we asking the mechanism for clarification purposes? Because personally, I know I've shared, I personally don't believe that any legislators should be able to initiate a question on the ballot.
We're asking for clarification at this point. That's what the motion is.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't find it right now.
So-
All right, so
okay.
I'll amend my motion to just say,
Yeah.
asking the Office of Law for an opinion on what mechanism might be used for allowing legislative-initiated ballot questions at the municipal level.
Yeah, I like that. Second.
Okay. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Right. This is what it's about. Okay, so I believe that was the ballot question procedures. If there's nothing else there, thank you so much, Eileen. So we have the changes to fair election practices. This is the election report deadlines, penalties for late filing, surplus funds, and prohibited practices.
So I know that, I think for the election report deadlines, that's being worked on. That's where we said for amended reports had to be within the 15 days.
Sure.
And then the penalties for late filing. So that's being looked at. Cynthia's working on a draft of that. And then the surplus funds, she has the information that we did on that in terms of the
Nonprofits,
501c3.
yeah.
Allowing other choices.
Right, so the prohibited practices are not something that we've really gotten
talk
into
too much about it,
completely.
yeah. Okay. Now, are there any, I don't think there's much of them. Because we're just waiting for this legislation, right, at this point. So there's not really much there.
Now, we're halfway through the 90-day session, so if anything has to go through state law, the deadline's passed for bill submissions.
Well, were we planning to put anything forward?
That's what,
For some of these.
nothing specific, but I know that I had a note from last meeting that, and I thought you reached out as well to find out
That was the
if-
city, I believe.
if we
Eileen had
need
asked.
to have that, the clock is rolling, for city legislation?
Yeah, that was for city. Did we ever, we never
City
got an
legis-
answer.
I know, you were, asking if we needed to have that February, was the suggested month to have legislation in.
To
Well,
be
that's for the
impacted
city.
for this upcoming
Right.
election.
For the
I mean,
city, okay,
that's ideally, we get it in this month,
Okay.
but since it's not ready yet, we'll go next month.
Okay.
Okay, because we're gonna be really into budget next
Right
month.
on that tight. Yeah.
If they're saying that they're busy with budget now, which I believe for sure, next month's gonna be probably just as bad or worse.
Right. Well, we're still, I mean, the election year starts in August,
Right.
but you can still make changes, so. So prohibited practices, do you want to discuss that now, or do you want to do some research, or?
Well, we can do some research, though. Are there any that stands out? Because the practices.
Well, we've talked about the idea of, we've had some issues with the lunches with constituents
Sure,
that became
yeah.
fundraisers, and there have been some things in the past that have been brought up, so I don't know.
I think maybe we can talk through some prohibited practices that we want to.
Well, first of all, have you both, I mean, I'll be honest with Fresh, have you both read the code for fair election practices? Okay.
Some.
So,
Yeah.
all right, what in the fair election practices would you like to see changed?
Well, personally, I didn't find that there to be many
Okay,
that needed to
okay.
be changed. That's why I'm
Okay.
asking you: is there a list
Okay.
that you may have thought of? Because I don't see there being any practice
Well,
except
we've
for what
talked
we've
about
talked.
them in the
Yeah.
past.
Well,
Yeah, except for
yeah.
the donations that were.
Yeah,
That
donations
was the
need to be
only-
allowed to go to local nonprofit groups and not just to the city coffers or
Right,
to
well,
their
that's under
party.
surplus funds.
Yeah, I don't think that was. Personally, I didn't see any practices
Yeah.
that. That's why when I saw that, I wasn't certain where
And
you were
just,
coming from.
we
with
could
this.
ask for providing documentation of, if there's an unusual request, like what we've dealt with Alderman Tierney's lunches and gifts, that, we ask for further explanation, and it could be on that form, so we don't have to come back to them. But if there's a provision on the form that offers a box or something for explanation, instead of just putting in
a code. Sure.
letter, then that might cover some of the back and forth. It's not meaning we'll necessarily approve it or not, but we'll know more. We just need to make that form as clear and easy as possible because, you were a
Back and
saint
forth.
and have been a saint in what you've done.
So you're saying you want a box for,
A line, a blank square
A
that
section, yeah.
that says explanation. There is, whenever they put in other, right? Whenever we put in other, you are supposed to include an explanation of what other means. Right? And is that, when you put in your explanation of other, is there already a space for that? Or you
you're
do it
expected to put in
separately?
other, and then you put it in.
And is there already a space? I forget. Or if you have to just add it separately.
I can look it up.
Oh, I might have I probably have a copy. One of the task force recommendations was to have a searchable site for campaign contributions. Now, already you can look up individual campaign finance reports,
have
and
to
you
know
can
the committee.
see individual campaign contributions. So the searchable site that they're recommending, does that mean it's just all in one spot?
Similar to the federal.
If they want a site like you can do at the state and federal level.
So if I contributed to 3 or 4 candidates, it's right there under my name, instead of going to each candidate's form to find out who I contributed to.
Yeah, it's all in one.
Right. And so that's a question to the city.
Well, the answer is technology and,
And time.
well, money.
So that's why
We've
emphasis on
been down
syncing.
that route, and I doubt it's changed, but,
Okay.
so
So that's an answer to that recommendation then.
if we
is-
go with the state, you can do it. If you don't go with the state completely, it would be something local, same as a number of
Couple other
things with
things,
technology.
right,
So
got
it's
it.
doable, it's just a question of,
Right. But if we went with the state, it would be there. But then our
Right.
election would be aligned with the state.
correct.
And some people want to keep it unique to the city.
Yeah. Because they're not really willing to give us all their resources if they know it'll
I
be
get
extra
it,
money.
yeah. I mean,
Unless there's a partnership there, then that would possibly require some state legislation, just like when they passed that extra $750,000+ to in tax relief for the city. Since state government is being
Well,
ran
they
here.
could probably do it, but it would be a cost.
Yeah.
Right, that's what we found before.
Yeah.
So to answer your question about other, it does have a space there for description.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I know contribution limits would be a part of that, though we've already discussed that we should keep them at the same level.
I don't see any reason to change them.
I don't either.
Yeah, so I don't. So did you add this you added it because it was in previous conversation?
We've been carrying it over. I mean, it's
Right.
been what we've been talking about. So when we talked about it in November, there was talk about documentation of a gift.
Yeah.
We talked about the surplus funds, which we took care of. We talked about closing the candidate campaign committees, which we've taken care of. And then it was talking about needing clarification and research on the types of campaign expenditures that were prohibited and the types that were accepted, things including personal or official donations and expenditures. It was adding some clarification. So,
Yeah, I haven't,
and giveaway items is something else that's come up in the past. So,
yeah, use of funds for lunches and gifts. I have a note here regarding
all right, well, maybe
wanted
we
to
can just
change the
defer that
code.
and we'll look at it again next month.
change the code for that.
So as you just mentioned, Debbie, talking about the gifts specifically. So let's do some more. So the gifts, payment from campaign funds for lunches.
Well, they called it,
Well,
that was Ellie, right?
right, yeah. So we've, I mean, we don't have to do, I mean, it's just making sure we address things that have come up in the past. So we all know that lunch for candidate, or I think what I was trying to get at was that we would look at it in terms of personal, just be a little bit more specific on certain things. So I'm trying to get to the
Yeah,
code.
good to saying.
Maybe a clarification of fundraising activities and in
In off
office-
election years.
Right, so
Or
clarification.
office holders.
Right.
office holder activities.
Sure.
Right, because that has
would
come
be
up
good to look
before
at.
in terms of what can be used, what campaign funds can be used for.
Right.
So maybe maybe we need to look at it from the standpoint of what can campaign funds
Yeah.
be used for?
Mm-hmm.
What are the others that people are
Are you?
using?
Yeah. Now maybe that also requires us going through and seeing what have people put for the others and what has been a common other.
Well, they just put other, and they'll put like.
And the
footers.
description.
So I think we have to be, I think it behooves us to be a little bit more, to clarify it a little bit more.
Now, I remember at the state level, I'm sure this is a question for every level of office. They do give examples.
Right, I mean, they
and it
get
was-
even into furniture and things
Right,
like
it was
that.
basically personal, like a phone, a camera, anything personal is out of your pocket. Anything that is for the greater good of the office, of being, fulfilling that office, can be paid for by public funds, which would include basic office supplies and furniture. But any decorative furniture is on you, is personal. You know, a lot of people wanted to buy cameras for photo ops and stuff, but that's personal.
Yeah.
Remember when we had the office, you know, our budgets and
40,000.
the only ones that we've come across were what we've been discussing were the is a lunch a duty of the office holder, or is it a fundraiser to get to know people? Is gifts to a local college in your district part of being the alderman, or is it part of just being nice?
Yeah.
Well, those are exactly what
Yeah, we
Yeah.
talked.
we talk about, so things. So, I mean, those are the types of things I think we need to be more specific about. And maybe it's defining things.
Okay, so maybe at the next meeting, we can have those 3 to 5 points to talk through and decide how can we specify that. That way we can get do some
Okay.
research up into that meeting. So what I have here, we have gifts, payments to campaign for lunches. That was one of the concerns, how an office holder can spend their money in their campaign account. Okay.
So right now, there's not,
Specifying the
there's
other.
nothing specific, so especially if we give examples, it'll make it easier for the campaigns and the incumbents to understand. But I think you said it was this year was worse than other years, right?
Well, things have come up, things have changed, social media.
Sure, right.
Social media being one of them. You know, it's very clear you can't give something to somebody with the promise of an exchange
Right,
of the
to
vote.
buy or bribe.
So for
Yeah.
instance, at the state level, prohibited expenditures include personal use or benefit of the candidate, candidate's family, or any other individual. The mortgage, rent, or utilities for the personal residence of the candidate or the candidate's family. Paying for political endorsement, making loans to other political campaigns. Expenses, now that, the key word there is loans.
Oh, okay. 'cause I know
Expenses
some
related
people
to the necessary and ordinary course of holding office. So that's where it gets a little iffy. Now, in the last election, we would have an alderman or alderwoman maybe give $500 towards hot dogs at a community event. And they said it was part of their alderman thing. And then you'd have another candidate saying, well, they're really using it as a campaign because they're running for office.
Well, can we start to think about then what is a time frame that we should say this is? Is that possible?
No, because they're in office.
But that's a good
If they're an
example.
incumbent, I mean,
okay.
there's certain things that come with incumbency.
Right.
So, you know, there were some that said yes, and then it comes out of the campaign. Now, if it comes out of the campaign, then you have to have, you know, with the approval, you have to have the approval headline. Expenses related to travel outside the country. guess you could say that for outside the city. Tuition, and any other associated costs for educational programs or schooling, and administrative accounts. And then for charities, generally campaign funds may not be used solely for charitable purposes. Maryland law requires funds to be used for the purpose of supporting or opposing a candidate, question, or political committee. Furthermore, it's important to keep in mind that contributors give to campaign committees for one important reason. They want to support the candidate, question, or political party in an election. When campaign funds are spent for non-campaign related purposes, it frustrates the intent of the contributor. However, there are instances when a charitable donation is permissible because it is for a campaign purpose. For example, a candidate may permissibly use campaign funds to attend a charitable event, since attending the event increases the candidate's visibility and allows the candidate to network with potential voters and donors. Additionally, if the political committee is in the process of submitting a final report, the political committee may make a direct contribution to a charity. So it also gets into legal defense, and then recount in contested elections, and there's some other stuff in here. So
What are you reading from?
I'm reading from the summary, the Maryland State Board of
yeah, the state.
Elections. Yeah. So we, I think what we can do is to look at expenditures. And again, we can talk with Ashley about how that can go into code, but I think having a definition of what an expenditure is and stating things like an expenditure must have an electoral purpose. So we can look
And then
into.
there's no excuse you're doing this for your election.
Yeah, I mean, there's
What is
going to
it?
be some gray, but I think if the bottom line is thinking of what the donor gave you money for, the donor gave you money to go towards your campaign to be elected.
Retain your seat.
They didn't give you money to give to a charity or to
Unless it's surplus funds.
buy hot dogs.
But for surplus funds, we're letting them do it.
To do these other things. So if we look at it from the donor perspective, that gives a new view than from the candidate perspective.
Okay, so maybe one of the things to ask the Office of Law is, do these specifics need to actually go in code, or can they be
Separate.
separated part of procedures?
Right.
Or
Because
or
it is nice.
clarification elsewhere?
Yeah, it is nice to give examples. And
Though if it's in
there's
code, it's
going
more
to be
punishable.
gray. There's no way, I mean, we're not going to cover everything, but there's going to still be gray,
Mm-hmm.
but it's better than what we have now.
Okay,
right,
so we can
to
check with
offer.
them. But I think this is what,
I think the issue is it not being in code. So this, I know part of that shouldn't just be in procedures. We may do want to put something in the code to
Yeah, some of
clarify.
that. Yeah, there was some good.
yeah, they also get into,
Travel, tuition, ed.
yeah, we were covered already for that.
Good.
There's stuff in here about petty cash too, but I don't think that's really been something that's come up.
Now, these would all be separate pieces of legislation,
No.
or would they all go into one? So if
Just
we
goes under
probably should,
Yeah.
so we would
Which one?
for the changes to the fair election practice. So we probably want to go through those ask these questions about prohibited, and then they would update the legislation to reflect the
Well, I think
proposal.
we go and we say how to,
Yeah.
Election deadline would be one, and penalties for late filing.
okay, I'm sorry, I thought we were past that. What are you talking?
Oh no, we're on prohibited practice. Just making sure. So all of these would be on one. Would be the one legislation
bill?
that she's working on. The
No.
one.
No,
Okay,
'cause
great.
it's
So
all
they are going to be
different.
separate.
Separate bills.
That's what I was making sure that they're all going
Right,
to be.
they're separate.
Okay, so we'll hold off.
I mean, it might be, falls under fair election
election practices,
practices,
but we
but it
can
would be
hold-
different.
good. So, because we
we-
can move forward on the
Yeah,
others,
can we
but
give
this
her,
one.
can we give them the
They have
election?
that.
Yeah, they have
Okay,
that.
They have the election
Yeah,
report
and we
deadline.
made those
Okay.
motions.
But they're not
and-
working on, but I'm saying, because we're still talking about prohibited practices, so they're not moving on any legislation on that one. That's one where we're
It's
still going to take
prohibited
some more time.
practices that we still are working.
Okay, that's what I'm making sure. Great. Okay. I really love this, by the way. Okay, I think general, we're finished with the prohibited practices. We already have our questions, so we'll just look out for the updates from them. General discussion is just there. If there was any final pieces that we may not have covered, I know you kind of already covered what I was going to put in general discussion, which was earlier with the mail-in ballot
Okay,
portion.
now, 2 meetings ago, you had mentioned about giving us some information on recount.
Yeah, and I said that that's no recount is not no
It's not an
that's
issue?
no I don't
Okay.
think that's going to be something we need for this election. Recount. But I think, to general discussion, if we want to possibly maybe, or if we want to maybe talk a little bit about what Andrew shared, because we didn't really talk about that. But I will say that,
Well, we did go to, I did put an
Oh, that'll be
item
for the-
task force on elections.
okay, so we'll just talk about it all then, okay? Because I know it's kind of what we were just talking about with the,
Okay, because I
okay, well,
asked
let's
to
move
put it in
forward to it.
because there was two areas that I think I was working off an old copy.
Oh, yeah, you
And plus,
said
we were going really late.
yeah, I know what's going in.
So
public, yeah.
the two recommendations that,
I saw your email about that. Public database and the redistricting independent.
I think it's like 11, these are not,
Numbered the same.
yeah, I think it's 11 and 9, let's see.
7 and 8, maybe?
I think you're right, 7 and 8. Yeah, I don't know why they're not ordered on this.
I know they're not the same. I noticed that last month. That my numbers were not the same as the tax statement.
The table of contents.
We did that. We
Okay,
did this
page
one.
13 is the campaign, is the public database.
I think we talked about that. It's the ward boundaries. And I guess we didn't
Okay,
talk
here it
about
is.
the searchable database.
Yeah, it's right here. You got it?
Okay.
Page 13.
Yeah.
Did I leave off that?
So the recommendation was to ensure that a searchable database of campaign finance contributions to mayoral and city council candidates exists. So, as Debbie said, they are posted online, but they're not in an easily searchable database. Now, I don't know if that's something that the MIT department here can do. I mean, we can certainly ask.
No, let's ask. I think that would be helpful.
But they don't get put into a database, but we can always ask.
Well, because they would have to take them off of the submitted.
Individual
That would be a
filings.
Yeah,
I don't
that
know if
would
the
be
juice
a-
is worth the squeeze.
That would be a lot to have to do versus someone just going to the campaign fund
Yeah,
reports and
I
seeing
think-
who donated.
I think it's a big ask for our footprint, I mean, our size.
Well,
I think if people, there's 8 candidates, 9 candidates.
Well, I think we ask and let them say if they can do it or
See.
not,
Okay.
not make the assumption
True.
that they can't.
Okay, because this
so-
was a recommendation.
Right, so I think we ask.
Okay.
Is that going to be a motion to ask, or are you just going to ask them?
can just
Okay, we're
ask.
just going to ask them.
And then the second one, which unfortunately I passed over, is the Board of Supervisors election.
Number 8.
No, the City Council should establish a fully independent commission for the drawing of ward boundaries.
13, yeah.
Same page.
Well, I'm in full, come on, we're not, conflict of interest, we're not, this is
Yeah,
clear.
Yeah, but it's never, we can't get it passed. But this is every 10 years, right? Every 10
When they have
years
to, yeah,
is
they use the-
redistricting. And I believe for 30 years, this has been recommended.
Yeah.
But our existing.
Well, I don't know if they've recommended an independent commission. So there is an independent commission within the city that makes the recommendation, but then it goes to the city council.
And they have to approve, exactly,
And so,
to eliminate.
again, I'm not clear where this falls in the Board of Supervisors of Elections. I know that that was of some discussion within the task force.
Would we help to select the members of this private commission? You know, that's the conversation too.
That's
How
a-
would they get, yeah, I
that's
know
a
that's
whole
kind of
other
going into the
thing.
details, but in my
Yeah,
mind, I'm
and
just
Andrew
going through it
mentioned
all.
some ways to do that tonight, right? How
So what we
to
ask-
select, whether it be by draw or, whatever.
What, for the independent redistricting? I mean, he said, but I couldn't remember if it was Baltimore City or Baltimore County that just submitted a
He said
proposal
Baltimore
for
City.
that. So,
That's what he said.
if someone wants to grab that proposal and we could look at it and say maybe, support it or something like that, but I don't think it's something that's a city council.
So this independent commission is different. So the Charter Review Commission is appointed every
There
10
it is.
years
I know Josh Cohen.
to come up with better government ideas.
This is the ward. He's talking about the ward redistricting
Yeah,
commission.
right.
Right.
So they have recommended independent redistricting of wards, for the last three
I didn't know
decades.
that.
So, and council, though, has the final say. And so council says, nah, we're good. And same way with the nonpartisan primaries,
Now,
nonpartisan
has it-
elections.
It's been a while since I had the charter commission, but
Yeah.
I don't recall ward redistricting being,
I think so, unless I'm getting it confused with nonpartisan elections, because they both, I thought, were
I think you're thinking of the
multiple.
nonpartisan. I'm
Okay,
happy to
maybe.
look it up, but I don't
Maybe.
recall ward redistrict. I know that ward redistricting, there has been discussions about, do we have to have 8? Should we have less? Should we have elections based on wards, or should we have it a different framework? I mean, those types of questions have come up.
Yeah.
So should you make it,
So the one that we just had with Jared Littman as chair,
right?
that, what was that called? The
That's
redistricting
the-
commission?
Yeah,
But not,
the task force.
inde-
Oh, recommend.
but they weren't independent, they were beholden to who?
Well, the city council persons were a part of the selection process, or no?
Right, they,
Yeah, so they
I went
chose
to, I
the
mean, I went to
people.
the
there was somebody from every
meetings, but-
ward, but I think if I'm
That's the
reading this
conflict.
correctly, it's about having a mandate. So it's about, this is what it needs to be, and not necessarily bringing it to.
The
city
council, I would like
council.
that.
So
for
it's
sure.
saying an independent commission should have a mandate to draw the boundaries that are implemented once approved by the majority of commission members. Okay, so that's what the task force.
And so that independent commission would come up with a plan, and that would be implemented, and it would not have to be approved by the current council and mayor.
Right. So I believe what they presented, now, what they presented the last time also, they had 2 different redistricting, and they were very close. So they actually presented both to the city council.
But neither one,
No, one was
Right.
picked. It's still being drawn up.
the alignment of boundaries.
The
Right,
description, yeah.
Sure, yeah, I remember.
So, and this recommendation goes further and says with this approach, a 9-member commission would be made up of 3 Annapolis residents registered as Democrats, Republicans. So the current commission doesn't necessarily identify, I don't think it does. But again, I think this is a recommendation that's direct to the city council and not necessarily something
But we can
But we
at
can
least
certainly,
support
we
it
can
or
weigh in
say-
on
yeah,
it.
we can
Weigh in on it.
answers.
I think this whole report, we should weigh in on whether we have the power to do anything.
So I just want to make sure that we covered those two.
Sure.
So I
Okay.
apologize for,
Oh,
I didn't
no,
admit
you're-
them.
Come on, you're fine. Oh, okay. Well, then we'll hold off then that one there a little bit further. Let me make sure I have. Oh, wow, that's because the proposal is for review. We're not going to be able to do.
We don't have
tonight.
it
Yeah,
to review.
tonight. So we'll have that next month. So, is there anything else that you all may want to share or have? Okay, well, this is it, you all. Is there a motion then at 8:17 to adjourn this meeting?
I motion that we adjourn the meeting at 8:17.
Second.
So all in favor, blessings, thank you.
All right, turn your mic off.